Finally, let's talk about the developmental aspects of our nervous system and think about some common disorders and what happens to our brains in aging. So, if we have issues with neural tube development, babies can be born with something called spina bifida, which is an incompletion of the vertebrae, typically in that lumbosacral region. If it's not very serious, it might just be a little dimple, but in most serious conditions, the spinal cord can actually protrude. And this is usually caused by the mom not having enough folate in her diet. So again, neural tube closure happens around 4 weeks, which is really why as soon as you think you might become pregnant or you're trying to become pregnant, you want to take prenatal vitamins because that's going to have folate in there. And what folate does is it helps the neural tube close fully and form the brain nicely. Without the folate, you could have issues like, example, spina bifida, an incomplete closing of that neural tube, an incomplete closure of a spinal cord. For some babies, surgery is usually needed to help with that spinal cord protrusion. Another issue from low folate is kind of on the other end of the neural tube. So at the bottom end, we're thinking issues with the spinal cord. At the most severe end of the spectrum here is anencephaly, which is an absence of a large portion of the brain. So these babies are born with it completely lacking in the cerebrum, so lacking those hemispheres, and they die within a few hours or days of birth if they make it that far. And again, this is caused by low folate. So women, you really need to be taking those prenatal vitamins and keep that folate up so that the neural tube can form and close all the way. Now, if there is an issue with oxygen during birth, so if the cord gets wrapped around their neck, or there's some sort of issue with the birth itself, then the child might experience low oxygen in the first part of its life. And this can cause cerebral palsy, which is a whole class of movement disorders that appear in early childhood and lead to poor voluntary muscle control. And some also have mental retardation and seizures. So think about what could happen with issues with folate and oxygen. Let's talk about our aging brains. Now, this is the area that I research, and so it's the area I'm most passionate about, but I will try to keep it short. So when an infant is born, their brain is going to increase in 5 times size by the time they reach an adulthood. And the first thing that they're doing is they're making synaptic connections and they're myelinating all their neurons. And there's really no change in neural number. Then, when we reach puberty into our mid-20s, we're going to start to have pruning. So we're actually going to lose some of those synaptic connections that we formed during childhood. And we're going to strengthen the areas that we really want to keep. So these are things that we are learning, we're strengthening those connections, and we're going to prune back other things that we're not using. And in this, we can say that the system is plastic, or it's still changeable. So our brain can still learn new things even to an old age because of that ability to form connections and then pull those connections back. As we get older, we're going to reach central nervous system decline, mainly due to circulatory issues. So not getting enough blood and oxygen to your brain is one of the main risk factors for developing dementia and other associated disorders.